Dilip went over this slide, I think in the first session sometime. And so these are the technologies that are being used by QAs generally. Not just QAs, I mean, it's a whole team is using this type of technologies. And so we'll be covering each of them one by one. You may get some hands-on on some of the technologies. Some technologies you will get some overview because it requires some programming knowledge. So you may not take a deep dive into certain technologies. But we'll start with today with the certain QA tools. What tools you are using day in and day out as a, not just as a QA, but the whole team is using those tools. So like developers, they are using the same tool as you are, and everybody is putting the artifacts right within the tool to improve the communication and so forth. Okay, so as I said, I mean, next 3 to 4 weeks, I think our remaining sessions. It's all about technology, so you will dive into that, each of the tools here. Any of you recognize any of these tools here? Any of you have done anything with these tools, technologies? So you probably have some programming background, right? So otherwise, like HTML, so any applications, right, that we use, I mean, these days, it requires some type of HTML knowledge. It's built on all the web apps, basically, pretty much. Or including the mobile, some of the mobile apps, they use HTML in the back end, in the front end as well. There are UFTs there, database, obviously, any application that you deal with, they all require backend to store the data somewhere. And that's where it's in the database. Java, C#, they are programming technologies. So you program the actual applications in those technologies. And the SQL is also important. It requires to interact with the database. But again, as I said, I mean, we'll be looking at those technologies one by one and work through that. Okay. Before I dive into that, I want to see how much you guys remember from first 3 sessions or 2 sessions. Okay, because it's important that you understand the SDLC and other things and see how you fit in as a QA and what you do as a QA. Okay, so we'll go through that exercise and so we'll go through that exercise and to see how much you remember. Hopefully that will refresh your memories before we go to the technology side. And then we will see how the technology fits in to overall SDLC process, because that's what you need to understand as a QA. So let me flip back to the slide here. And let's see if we can do certain things here. So what we'll do is, let me ask you one thing. So what's the starting phase of the SDLC? Does anybody remember? What is the starting phase?
Analysis. No, planning.
Does it start in the analysis, planning? Planning, right? Yes. So, and can anybody tell me what happens in the planning phase?
You get all the requirements for the from the user or the business.
Okay. Is it what you do in planning phase generally?
Generally, the planning phase is where the business owners bring the requirement, and then basically as they talk about the so the requirements, what the app is or what the application is supposed to be doing, how much cost is going to go inside, and yeah, stuff like that, pretty much.
Okay, that is correct, right? So it's just the idea, basically, right? At this point, on a piece of paper, some people will drop the idea, hey, we want to build this software. How much is going to cost us? What's the high level requirement looks like? What is supposed to do? You guys went through that exercise, right? 1-page exercise in the first session. Business problem identification and breakdown. That's what it typically happens. So once they decide, once they give a go ahead, they will start in the planning. They will say, also, okay, So it's gonna cost me $1 million, and that's our budget. And it might maybe takes us like 5 months to implement this whole system end to end. So somebody is doing that planning work. Do you guys know who that person is? What's the role? It's a business, but from the IT side, right? Somebody has to be involved because they don't know much.
The project manager.
Yeah, generally it's the project manager. Okay, that's the first person on board the team. Okay, so project manager. Oops. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. We will not worry about it. So generally the PM comes on board, right, in the planning process, and they will figure out, okay, we're gonna need 4 resources for 3 developers, 1 QA, 1 BA, and so forth. And they will complete the planning process at that point. Then what happens in the analysis phase? The next phase is analysis, right? What happens in the analysis phase?
You see it to the business analytics person.
Okay. So you bring on board the business analyst, right? And what's their role is, business analyst role? What do they do?
They calculate the cost and then the product that we get after building, if it works it or not.
They get the requirements from the business.
Right, so they are the ones that actually collects the requirements. They sit down with the business, they set up schedule, whatever, however they do it. There are various techniques they follow. It's an interview process. Sometimes they do it, they run the focus groups. They do the JAT session, joint application development type of sessions for the requirements gathering. And they will collect the requirement and capture the requirements. If it's still waterfall, right? If you are dealing with the waterfall, then you will get a document like this, like what you have in the flow typically, which is a big document. So they collect everything and they will give you to review or whatever. But if it's agile, right, they will create the user stories. They will start creating the stories, capturing each individual requirement in form of user stories, and start putting. Ultimately, these are the requirements they'll be collecting. Now, in the analysis phase, what else do you exist, or what do you guys do as a QA? What is your role in the analysis phase?
We verify 3C and T.
Right, so you actually work with the business analysts, and they give you for the reviewing the requirements, and then you do 3C and T analysis at that point. Anything else that you guys do at end of analysis phase? Do you guys produce anything? Test cases comes later on, right? Because you don't have requirement yet sign off, but it's a high, you have the draft sort of requirements, right? But at end of the analysis phase, you also produce one document. Did everybody read that document? Test plan document, right? So you start, once you understand the requirement, you start putting together test plan document at that point. Okay. So that's what you do as a QA here. Okay. So this is where you come in and test plan document you do as a QA here. Okay. You guys can see what I'm typing, writing. Okay, that's me here. All right, we won't worry about it. Okay, let's move on to the next phase, design phase. Who is doing the work in the design phase?
Developer.
Is that a developer? Who is doing the work? What happens in the design phase? Think about that. What's the goal of the design phase? Can you repeat that, Joyce? Not the construction, no.
You the design the software.
Right? So it's a design, design of the software. Somebody has to create a design, right? And who does that typically? That's typically system architect, okay, or lead developers. Okay, one of them, somebody who is technically very experienced, they will look at the requirements document and they will start building out the design for the software. Okay. So here, design, here requirements. Okay. Now, on the design, what is that you do as a QA? What's your role in the design phase? Anybody? So you review. So you review the design, but what else you do in the design phase?
Writing the test cases.
The different modules.
Not the different modules or not the writing the test cases either. So remember what activity you started in the requirements.
The context diagram.
Not that either. You started the test plan, right? So you will revise it according to the design as well, because non-functional requirements you have to accommodate somewhere in the, and you typically developers or architects, they flush out those non-functional requirements in the design phase. And you will revise your test plan accordingly. Okay, so that's what it happens. So test plan, that's the activity you will do, and work through that process. Okay.
And here we can plan the expected results.
No, this is still a test plan, right? So do you have the expected result at that point? You identify only high level scenarios. What are the high level meaning? Very high level. I'm gonna need 50 or 500 test cases. And these are the high level scenarios, managing lender. Okay, I'm going to do guesswork. Guesswork meaning based on some experience, past experience and so forth. You will come up with the estimate and put it in the test plan. And that's the activity you will be doing here. High level scenarios and so forth.
So is it the test leads or the testers?
It's a test lead, but you will become a test lead someday. They may not give you from day one, but they will still get your input, right? Because the way they divide the work is test lead. They will say, oh, you're gonna be working on this module, maybe manage lenders. Tell me how much estimate or how much time it will take you to test it, or what's the complexity looks like and so forth. They will divide the managed users to somebody else as well. So you will have input. From day one, you may not be creating test plan. Okay. Okay, so end of the design. What other activities, what happens afterwards? What's the next phase? It's implementation, right?
Code implementation.
Okay. So next phase is a code implementation, or actually start, folks have completed a design, they are start building the software. They are going to write the code, whatever technology they are using. Now, what is your role as a QA in the implementation phase? Do you do anything in the implementation phase?
Based on the requirement and whatever analysis we have done, we need to give all the information to the developers, coordinate with the developers.
Is that what you do as a QA? Is that your role? Your role is not to tell developers how to or when to start or stop, right? So developers is writing the code. What is your activity as a QA?
The validate,
This is where you're gonna dive into, start whatever you are doing over last 2 classes, right? Those are the activities you will be conducting in the implementation phase. Start creating the detailed test cases, breaking down the scenarios. Remember, planning phase, right? It might be 2 weeks or 1 month, well, not more than that. Requirements might be a month or 2 months, depending on how complex the requirements are, or could be 3 months. Design is most likely less than 1 month type of activity. Implementation could be 6 months or a year, right? You are not sitting idle as a QA. You will be writing the test cases, detailed test cases, breaking it down. You might be writing on a piece of paper or might be using the tool. Okay. So that at the end of implementation, you don't have software here, right? Remember, you don't have software. They are developing here. So at the end of implementation, you developers are done with the coding. You are done with your testing, test cases, and all those things. You haven't done any testing here, right?
Yeah.
All you have done so far is identify the steps, identify expected result, and that's it. You don't have actual results. That's where the next phase, you move on to the next phase after 6 months or a year, and that's where you start executing your test cases one by one. Okay. It might be you doing the work, or you might have a whole bunch of team. Because testing phase might be 1 month, you might have multiple cycles to execute. If you have 500 test cases, you can't execute alone, right? So generally, I mean, companies like Nationwide or big companies, the QAs, they create the test cases, but they give it to somebody else to execute those test cases. And those people might be sitting in India or somewhere else, because testing is no brainer. They are testers as well, software tester. If you heard the term tester, they are not called QAs. You are the QA. You are involved in the overall life cycle of the project. Testers only do the testing generally. Execute the test cases, capture the results, and be done with it. Okay. So that's the activity happens in the testing phase. Actual execution of the test cases. What else happens in the testing phase? Well, what else is your role? Assuming you are a QA or tester or whatever. What else you do in the testing phase? Right? So while you are executing the test cases, you might find a defect. Software is not built according to the requirement. That's what is called defect. So that's what you will document as part of your execution cycle and hand it over to developers. So that whole process goes on. Okay. All right, so this part is important, testing phase, but again, depending on who is doing the work and so forth, you might divide and conquer with that. But what I hear from this is the most boring part, okay, for some testers, because that's a repetitive. You might have to execute the same test case maybe 50 times until the software is right. Okay, and the main work happens in the between implementation, design, and analysis for a QA, because that's where you're going to be using your brain a lot more. Testing is just executing and documenting mainly. Okay, so they will pay you money for up to these phases. Okay, they're not going to pay you money for testing. So because it's and here from the technology standpoint, right? Obviously, there are tools you can use, but there are automation software tools that you can leverage for executing the test cases maybe 50 times. People get bored, so you start creating the automation test and click a button and they will execute it at that point. Okay. Okay, so at the end of the test phase, what happens in the end of the testing phase? right? So UAT, and what is UAT? It's a testing by business, the actual users. It's a user acceptance. So you as a QA, you said, yep, I certify software is almost free of defect. May not be 100%, but maybe 95% in its usable condition. Now we can give it to the user. So nothing crashes in the system. There are no high priority defects or anything. Maybe minor cosmetic type of things exist. And you go give it to the user in the acceptance phase. And that's where user will actually run the business processes end to end. Hey, can I submit a loan? Can the lender approve it? And they will verify it from the business standpoint. See if am I getting email notification? So they will go through the same cycle. And at end of acceptance, what happens? The business testing is done, right? End of acceptance. At end of acceptance, they will say, yep, go ahead.
The product is launched.
Product is launched, yes. So what typically happens is business says, yep, software looks like meets our requirement or business needs. You can put it in production. So that's where the production rollout happens. And after that, it's a maintenance phase, right? So maintenance is nothing but, okay, minor defects comes in and
Bug fixing.
yeah, bug fixes, minor defects, and so forth. Now, minor meaning, typically what I have seen is kind of like a data related issue. They fix it in the backend. But any coding changes, you might have to repeat the whole cycle. Okay, so go through the from planning to the design to implementation and so forth. But if it's a data issue, they will say, yep, we can fix it, and so forth. Now here, I mean, you still play a role in the maintenance. It's not just a developer or production team, but as a QA, you might be involved in production support type of activities. Because you know the system most, because you wrote the test cases and so business says, yep, I want this person to test the production issues and maybe create a bug as well. So you will provide those support type of activities. Okay. All right, hopefully this refreshes the memory or whatever, this clears out certain things based on the activities. This is the important part, okay, because these are some of the interview things as well. They're going to ask you, okay, what activities you did, what phase. You should be able to remember, and if you have practice, right, or work through the process, then you should be able to relate what you are doing activities wise. Okay, so analysis and design is review process. Implementation is test case creation, documentation, and breakdown of analysis and so forth. Testing is testing, right? Acceptance is more like a supporting the users for creating the bugs and so forth.
So we are following waterfall model.
So this is SDLC, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a waterfall or it's Agile.
I mean, testing is what type of testing we are following?
No, this is again, it does not matter what methodology you are using, Agile or waterfall. Because this cycle you will do over 2 weeks in the Agile phase. Here, waterfall might have longer duration. That's the only difference. But again, over 2 weeks, you will be doing planning, analysis, design, implementation, pushing out the code in production. That's the Agile. But if you have 6 months type of thing, that's a waterfall methodology. Okay. And I'll go over some Agile part of it as well a little bit later, because that's required from your standpoint, some knowledge on that. Okay. So I'll give you this diagram. I'll get you document, keep this handy, right? What is that you do, what type of activities, and hopefully you will be able to understand what we discussed here. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Okay. So let me go over one more item. And then. Okay. All right. So let's understand the little bit process here. Development process, right? Hopefully now you understand the SDLC, what happens. Now we'll zoom into the different phases, what really happens with the development process, because that's important for you to understand your role as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, let me start with the developers. Okay. Okay, these guys are developers. Okay. So generally in the implementation phase, right? So they get the requirement, same requirement as you are, and you are writing your test cases, they will start developing on your own. Okay. So generally they will develop somewhere on their laptops. Right. So this is the typical process. Now, so one person is given the module, what is that? Credit application module. So second guy is given the lender management. Third guy is given the manage users. Fourth guy is a user, right? They all are writing piece of code on their own laptop. Now, they have to, now they are writing individually, but at some point they have to basically merge. It's a typically a code merge, right? Process or so they use certain tools which can do that, allow them to basically merge the code and so forth. But what happens is they will generally at the end of the day, they'll be sending the code to some server or somewhere centralized location where everybody's code comes together. And typically it is called a develop server or dev environment, whatever, or server or environment. Okay. So this is a more, nothing, server is nothing but a bigger giant computer with a more processing power and so forth. So here, all the code is there. And now somebody has to make sure everything works together. All the parts are pieces are connected, right? Anybody remembers what kind of testing that is called?
Unit testing.
Integration
Okay.
testing?
So there are two testings, right? So developer is working on their computer, right? They have to do some type of testing while they are developing the code, which is called unit test. Unit testing. Okay. This is where they will do, everybody does it. They write unit test or they might do it manually. Doesn't matter, however they do it. But once it's deployed on the server, they have to, somebody has to do it, and generally the lead developer will do that, making sure that I can log in to the Arflon site and access manage lender, and from there I can go to the manage users and create certain users. So typically the testing is called integration test. Okay, so this one is a unit test. And then it's an integration test, which happens in the development environment. Okay. So generally a development lead, the lead developer, but again, it's a development team. You as a QA, you will not be doing integration testing.
So
Okay.
those three persons will not do the integration.
One of them could play a role. It's a more like a responsibility. Okay. So once they deploy it, somebody has to make sure all the components and nothing breaks in the system and so forth. So that's the testing that they will do, integration testing. Okay. Now, from there, right? Let's say they are done with their integration testing. Everything looks good, and they are ready to hand it over to QA for further testing. So this is where generally they will have another server or environment. Generally, it's called environment, and it's called system test environment. Okay. And at this point, they have done their own testing, and this is where QA comes in the picture. And they will do whatever testing that you guys need to do. Now, what kind of testing you guys do generally?
Functional testing.
So there is a functional testing, right? Let me just write down for sake of. So functional. What other term you heard?
Non-functional.
Well, functional, it's a functional, non-functional, but those testings are different. Generally, in the system test or QA environment, you will do functional test. Non-functional, we'll talk about that soon. Okay.
Black box.
Black box is more like a type. So what is the black box test here? So you guys remember white box and black box, right? So white box is if you know the code and what's internal components, then you can do white box testing. Okay, so generally unit test is a white box. Integration test is a part of white box. But you as a QA, typically you don't know about the code. You don't know how it's written. So it is typically called black box testing. You don't know anything about the code. So it's a black box testing. But you have a sanity test, right? I hope you guys remember. Sanity and smoke test / smoke. So what is that test? So developer gives you the code, right? Here, the developer gives you code. You just for sanity's sake, you just say, oh, let me just ping it to go to the URL, see if it comes up. That if the URL doesn't come up, you can't do anything, right? So that's part of the sanity testing. You might want to just check the email system. Our components are connected. You might submit a 1 credit app and see if it goes through. You get an email or something. That could be part of the sanity and smoke test. Okay. So functional test, sometimes you call system test, right? It's just you have system test. You are checking system components and everything, right? Functional meaning you are focusing on one component, maybe manage lender and testing it out, all the functionality. System test, you submit the information, credit app goes to the lender, comes back, you get a notification all for, that's like a system. It's a system. So it's a system test, functional test. I think Dilip mentioned its terms is used interchangeably. So you can call system test, functional test, same way. Anything else you do? So load and performance, right? You never do load and performance in the system test environment. Okay, you never do that here. Regression is another one, right? So you do regression. Before we go to the steps, so what is regression test?
Here, whatever the developer modified, we will check it again when your is modifying.
Right, so it's the code, you're executing your test cases again because your component is impacted by the small change in the code. So you have to make sure all the functionality is working correctly. So if developer fixes a bug, let's say lender search by name. So you are not able to get partial search result. It only matches exact name. So developer will update the code. You will go back and any lender related, search related test cases you have to execute again. That's the regression test from that standpoint. Okay. So this is all about functional testing. Okay. You never test the load, never stress test or anything else here in this environment. Generally for that, there is a reason for that. Okay. You typically have a different environment for non-functional testing. Why? There is a big difference between cost of the environment. So here, functional testing environment or system test environment, right? Typically the servers are not same as production. production, you have a heavy or beefier servers, which can handle 500 users. In the system test, I mean, you are using it as a QA, maybe few other team members, and that's it. Nobody else is using that. So there is a big difference between cost. And if you are doing the functional, non-functional tasks, you want to make sure your hardware matches the production environment. Because you are trying to simulate 500 user load. Think about it. System will crash right here because it only supports maybe 10 users, not more than that. And this costs much dollar amount, right? These are dollar issue here. Okay, and that's the reason. So this is where you will do your performance, then you have stress and anything else. Okay, you guys understand the difference, why we have separate environments generally, right? Okay. Sometimes the non-functional testing environment, you also use it as an acceptance test. So you give, because this one, you run once a while, okay? You don't run this test every time. If there are major changes or major releases, every 6 months, you might want to do non-functional test, okay? System testing, you every release or every 2 weeks, you are doing it. But here, you might be running a performance test maybe every 6 months or 1 year, okay? So this environment is sitting idle. Sometimes you give user access to do user acceptance testing as well. So users, so UAT environment, you can call it as a UAT environment, which is more production-like. And this is where users, business users will do their tests. Okay.
So non-functional is not done by the QA.
Non-functional is done by the QAs, but they are specialized QAs. But because this performance testing, stress testing, there are specialized tools you have to learn, and it requires some scripting knowledge.
Does the automation testing do this?
No, automation testers are different. Okay, performance and stress testers are different. So we'll talk about tools, what tools, right? So you will understand the difference, where this thing fits in, but they are generally different testers. Okay. All right, so at end of this performance test and or UAT, right? Everything is good. You have production environment. This is production. And again, this can support 500 users, whatever it is, right? And business will start using it in the production. Okay, and any question on what we discussed here? Okay, so if no question, then we'll move on. So we are talking about tools, right? And what are the things that could happen? So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to come back in this line here. So developers, right? What tools using? So generally, they are not doing anything else, right? Other than writing the code and a bunch of other things. So typically, Java, C#, whatever database technologies. So these are development, dev tools, right? Okay, so these are development tools they are using. But they also use some QA tools or application lifecycle management tools. There's a term called ALM. So ALM. Application lifecycle management tools. Okay. Lifecycle management. Okay, ALM tools. Now don't get confused with ALM. There is a software called ALM as well. Okay, but these are application lifecycle management tools. So what these tools are is think about, right? Assume these guys are developing in India. Okay, you have a QA team sitting in maybe China or Vietnam. Okay, and your business users are in the US. Okay. You also have business analysts, which are where you have folks sitting in US working with the business to collect the requirements. And this is a typical scenario for companies, big companies like Nationwide and all of the people. Okay. So these guys writes the requirements and they have to give it to the developers as well as give it to the QAs. Now, if they send this type of documents in the email, it's not efficient, right? I mean, the whole process doesn't work that way. So what they typically do is they use the tools like they use the ALM tools, okay? Application Lifecycle Management, which covers the whole SDLC. Okay, and that's where you have tools called Azure DevOps, which supports the complete lifecycle requirements. They can document requirements within the tool. Developers can do the code management within the tool. QAs can write their test cases, tests, all kind of stuff. You can create the defects within the tool as well, and everything else. So ALM tool, Azure DevOps is one. There is a tool called Jira, is a second one, right? There is a ALM is a tool itself, which used to be from HP. Now it's from Micro Focus Cobol. So HP sold this ALM tool to Micro Focus, and now this company owns it. And don't worry about writing it down. Okay, I'll get you that in the slide. I have it documented. Okay. So there are three popular tools. Azure DevOps is used by pretty much all the state of Ohio is using Azure DevOps. If you work at any of the agencies here, Jira is JP Morgan is big on Jira, plus a lot of other companies. Okay, ALM is more like a dying tool. It does not support. I mean, it's been there for years, since early 2000s. ALM tool. Nationwide is still big on that. BMW Financial, a lot of local companies are still using that, but it costs so much money. People are moving away from ALM tool. Okay.
So what are we going to use or use here?
So here we will focus on Azure DevOps and Jira. Okay. We do have access to ALM. If any of you interested, we can hook you up with the ALM, but you only be able to access from this facility here. You cannot access from online. Okay, but Azure DevOps and Jira, both you will be able to work from home and work through that. Today we will cover Azure DevOps. Okay, we will go through the Azure DevOps. But again, understand the concept. It's an ALM. You can manage requirements to quality assurance activities, including defects and everything else in those tools. Okay. All right. So these tools are used throughout the process, right? During the testing activity, system test environment, non-functional testing, everything. Those are lifecycle management tools. Okay. So we were here under developers, right? So developers are using development tools, Java, C#, database, whatever development tool they want to use. Okay, plus they are using the ALM tool. Let's come back to the QA activities here. So we all know the QAs are using, again, ALM tools, Azure DevOps and all those things. Plus, QAs might be using some test automation tools. Specifically, we will be covering in this classes UFT or QTP, some Cucumber. Okay. Also, we will get you an overview of the Ruby Cucumber. Selenium, and water. Okay. I said it's an overview, this technologies, because Ruby is a programming. You don't know programming, but you will get hands-on on the Cucumber. You will learn how to write, and you will have activities here in the class. Selenium and water is more programming model that goes along with the Ruby programming. Okay, but I'll get you some overview on the Selenium water. We have a complete different camp that we conduct for this technologies only, specifically automation test using Ruby Cucumber. Okay, so and then finally, the QA also use SQL. Okay, SQL knowledge is very important for QA. As we talked yesterday, right? You may not have other modules ready. You might have to write the SQL to see whether it's actually storing in the database and so forth. So SQL is kind of more like a skill perspective, not the development standpoint. Okay, so you need to learn how to use query the database. How do you maybe create some test data in the database and so forth, but not the development side of things. Okay. All right, so those are some of the tools. Now coming back to the non-functional side of things, right? So again, as I mentioned, these are specialized skill sets, but there are some tools available in the market. JMeter, Load Runner, Windrunner, and so forth. We will not cover any of these tools here because that's a specialized skill set. Okay, but if you want to learn it, I can point you some. You can watch the videos and so forth for the JMeter. Other ones you cannot even get access because they cost a bunch of money. Okay. All right. Any question on what we discussed so far?
Okay, most popular automation tool.
So automation wise, you will be hearing Selenium a lot. Okay, pretty much. I know JP Morgan is driving towards that. Nationwide is already there with the Ruby. Now it supports multiple programming languages. So Selenium automation tool can work with the Java, C# programming or Ruby programming, Python as well. You need to pick up one of the programming in order to write the automation test. Now Ruby is the most easiest, and NetJets is very heavy. NetJets here in Columbus, they are heavy on the Ruby as well. It's easier for the QA to pick up without worrying about the syntax, because you have to write a code a certain way, and syntax can get complicated, like in Java or C# and so forth. And that's the reason I guess most of the companies are going towards Ruby programming. So if you pick up one with the Selenium, you should be okay. But you need to learn one programming language, that's for sure, to write the automation test. Now UFT and QTP, you will be doing a lot of exercise in the class as well. We have one dedicated session to get you understanding of how the automation looks like and what you can do. Now that tool costs a bunch of money as well. Okay, so that's why companies are moving towards Ruby Cucumber type of technologies, because it's free. We all like free, right? We India specifically say, yep, it's a deal. Let's go and implement. But QAs has to pick up those programming knowledge. Okay, it's a free, so that's the reason. Open source, free meaning open source technologies. You don't pay any money to use it. Okay. Any other question?
AWS is like Azure DevOps?
No, so AWS is so whatever we are talking about here, right? So AWS, Amazon Web Services, okay? That's the cloud technology. So what they do is you need this infrastructure, right? Now, two ways you can do it. If I have the money, I can buy all the server in-house. And assuming my server can support 50 users or 500 users. Now tomorrow, let's say you are adding another 500 users. So what's happening right now in the trend wise, why AWS, Azure, all those getting popular is, so you have to manage, you have to have a team in-house to manage these servers. So somebody has to manage all these servers in-house. So you will have to hire infrastructure people, network people, all those people to manage these servers for you. Somebody has to apply the patches ongoing basis and all those things. So there is let's say you end up hiring 4 more people and these guys cost 150,000 a year. So you are looking at 600,000, just base salary plus whatever the benefits and so forth. So I'm just giving you 600K, right? 4 people. Now, what these cloud companies are doing, instead of you hiring 4 people to manage this in-house, you rent the servers. So you are renting servers from AWS or Azure. And you pay monthly cost, let's say $100 per server. So you are paying $400. They will take care of all the patch and everything else. Now, let's say you decide to add 2 more servers. Okay. So you are not paying upfront any cost, right? So 600K you invested already, it is gone. But let's say you double your cost to $800. You added more load. So it's easy to add the server right here when you are renting. It fits into their network and it's with a button click. You don't do anything else. You just say, I need, instead of 1, you just increment the number by 2. And it will automatically copy whatever your code and everything. They will manage it for you. So you are looking at cost of $800 to $1,000, okay, per month. Think about what's the big difference here. 600,000 or 500,000, whatever you're paying, you are cutting your cost down to 1,000 is very low number, but I would say maybe $5,000 a month. You are paying a yearly 60K, which is still a lot cheaper. And you don't worry about upgrading the servers because after 3 or 5 years, you just say, okay, I want to change my server to different server, and you still pay the same amount year over year. So it's a big cost saving, and that's the reason companies are moving towards AWS and Azure, specifically infrastructure.
So the first case is you own it, and the second case is
That's
you
correct.
rent it.
It's a buy versus renting.
Okay.
So it's like you are buying a house, or do I rent it?
Mhm.
If it's cheaper for you to rent it because somebody else is maintaining it, then that's the reason our Azure app, right? We have a cloud app. Our Flown is sitting in the cloud. Well, as a Microsoft partner, we don't pay any cost. But if I have to buy the server, I have to manage all the access and everything else, and we have to do in-house all the maintenance of the server, which we don't do. So we just deploy our code and we are done with it. That's it. Okay. But more thing you learn, I mean, so that's another topic. If you do end up as a QA, or if you want to pick up those technologies as well, because that's the trend. Those technologies are already here last 10 years. AWS started back in 2000s. Microsoft came up in the early 2010s. So that will help you.
Azure is a Microsoft project.
Azure is a Microsoft. AWS obviously is an Azure. Google also has a cloud, GCP, which is a Google's. IBM has it. Everybody is coming up. Oracle has their own, and everybody has it.
What about DevOps?
So DevOps, right? This is what development. So DevOps, right? So terminology you're gonna hear DevOps, and I'm using it with the Azure, right? Azure DevOps. This is the tool we will be using. So when you break it down, right? DevOps. So development. And this one is ops is operation. So it supports the development process, and operation meaning maintenance and everything else. So this is not just development, but it's ALM, application lifecycle management. So you do manage the whole life cycle of the software using the Azure DevOps, including the code. You can have your code sitting in the Azure DevOps as well. You can deploy the code using the Azure DevOps tool, which are used by typically development. Okay, so that term came from the development and operation combined. Generally, you used to have like those tools separate in the past, or you may not have a tool in the companies. So you can do operation as well, like defect management, code deployment, automated. These are automated processes. Okay, I'm talking about you click a button and your code is deployed to the server, whatever is there. And if you have, let's say you have typical companies, they have 1,000+ apps, right? Generally companies like Nationwide, I don't know, maybe they have 20,000 apps, who knows? How do you manage this overall process without tool? It's just cost them so much money because you have to have people sitting and managing those apps. Instead of that, they invest in Azure DevOps type of tool, and they set up the processes, automated processes, so it will help them manage overall operations for IT development and deployment and all those things. Okay. For our purpose, we are focusing on ALM portion, application lifecycle management, but there are so many features available within the tools. Okay. All right, any other question? Okay, so let me flip back to the slide here. Okay, I'll send you these slides, right? And you can keep it handy, but hopefully you understand the process. That's the important part. Okay, you don't have to memorize anything here. Okay, before I dive into the tool, I do want to cover one more thing. And okay, so let's talk about Agile process, because you all understand the waterfall, I think now, right? You get the document, you do the work, you create another document, give it to somebody else, and work through the process. The reason I want to talk about Agile a little bit, I know you, Dilip, already covered some concepts, but I want to make sure you understand this. Because all the application tools, Azure DevOps, Jira, they work for Agile. Okay, they are Agile tools. Scrum, Agile processes, they support. They don't support waterfall. Okay, waterfall, you have to produce documents and work through them. Okay. So Agile process, let's talk about it. So here, somebody has to collect the requirement, right? We have still on SDLC phase. Planning happens a little bit before, right? But in the Agile, you have requirements. Who is collecting the requirement? So generally in the Agile world, you have a product owner. I have seen that the companies call product owner / BA, business analyst / product owner. That's role. Generally, companies have it. But what they do is they so we are talking about 2-week cycle, right? Generally, it's a 2-week sprint where we are doing the work. Now let me come back here. So let's. Okay, so Agile. Okay. All right, assume we have, I'm talking about the functionality side of things now. Okay, so let's say we have a managed lender. Okay, this one is a login. This one is a manage dealer, credit apps, and then you have so on. Okay, so generally Agile process, right? So you have SDLC, so you have 2 weeks or 3 weeks sprint. So every 2 weeks, the team will deliver some type of functionality to the business. That's the overall idea. So instead of waiting for 6 months or a year, every 2 weeks, team will deliver functionality, some functionality to the business. Okay, so that's the idea behind Agile process. So the business doesn't wait to see the software that long.
So here the business gives the whole requirement.
No, business is business. We all work for business.
Yeah.
The company, the actual people who is actually dealing with the customer or whatever that the process is.
So they give the whole requirements, but we deliver the product for each 2 weeks.
No, the idea behind it that, so to deliver the login functionality, right? You start with the 2 weeks before, okay? So let's say you have 2 weeks to deliver login. So what we do is we have a BA, QA, Dev, right? All of these people, they start sitting down with the business on day 1. They say, okay, what are the different logins? Who will be accessing the system? They collect all the different requirements in form of user stories. Okay. BA is responsible for collecting the requirement. They are responsible for getting the approval or whatever process they need to do. But QAs and Dev is also sitting in the same meetings. So BA is scheduling the meetings with the business. So here, BA will document all the requirements and QAs. So I'm just trying to put the timeline here. I'm just trying to blow out these 2 weeks, okay? So these 2 weeks I'm going to blow out. Let's say it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Again, it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On day 1, they will collect the requirement, what needs to be built over 2 weeks. Okay, so this is where requirements and they will get a sign up. Now QA and Dev from Tuesday to Wednesday, they will, or Tuesday to Thursday. So here developers will start developing, right? Developers say, okay, it will take us maybe 5 days or 6 days. So they say we can be done with the development over next 7 days. QA will take a look at the same story and they will document, they will start creating test cases. And they will say, oh, we'll be done maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it will take me 3 days. Okay, 3 days for QA. All right, and Thursday. They might be writing the test scripts as well. Test script meaning the some automation scripts, because this one typically automation comes in the picture as well. So QA might be creating some automation tests using Ruby, Cucumber, and so forth at this point. Now developer within the first cycle, oh, they say, oh, we have a software here on Friday. So they might have a scheduled release to give it to the QAs. So QA can start testing basically the software right on Friday. So this is where they will come and execute whatever they have built on Friday. If they find defect, they will create the defect, give it back to the developer. Okay. But again, whole development needs to be done by Wednesday. That's the idea. So whatever login functionality they agreed on with the business, they have to deliver by Wednesday. So QA might have to execute maybe daily basis the test cases, regression test or whatever new functionality is being delivered from the dev team. Okay, but at the end of Wednesday, let's say QA says, yep, everything is good. And development team is done. So what they will do is they will give it to the business. And business will test it on Thursday. Okay, if everything is good, business says, yep, I'm good with the code, you guys can push it out. So they push it out, the login to the production here. Okay, so that will be the prod release. And when you are using the tools, everything is automatic. Code deployment and everything. So here Thursday somebody goes and press the button, deploy to production, it will be deployed maybe around 12 o'clock at midnight. And then here, business will start using it in the production. Again, SDLC doesn't change. Okay, SDLC remains same. There is no difference in SDLC, but it's just a shorter period, smaller chunk of functionality. Okay, does it make sense, Nilima?
No, my question was actually the BA,
Mhm.
they could go to the user, the business, to get the information requirement for just the log.
Yeah, just the login,
Okay.
because that's their goal, to deliver the functionality. They will not worry about, hey, I have managed lender. Do I need to collect it? No.
So once this is done, they'll. go
Yep,
for the
yep,
next.
yep. That's correct.
So what is the?
Now,
use-
BA might be doing some other activity, like planning activity. They might be engaged with the business. Hey, what are the high level requirements coming up, and so forth. And so they might be documenting, maybe creating the placeholder for the stories as well. So there's some activity, because they are not sitting idle here. From they are doing other activities related to the requirement. But what they do here is generally, like companies, what they do is that, so generally they collect the requirements upfront. They document it maybe 90%. And on Monday, they review as a team at the beginning of the sprint. And if everybody agrees, then the BAs and QAs and developers will start working on their artifact. But BA collects pretty much all the requirements upfront before they pull it into the sprint to work on it. That's the that's the process that I have seen working properly. BA does upfront work before the sprint starts. Then they review with the team on Mondays, so that if anybody has a question, they can clarify it and collect, basically get the clarification from the business.
So that means that the developers have not fully, they have not finished with the software. He will still have to face stories.
Yeah, same thing, test cases and so forth. Because developer is not going to wait till like Wednesday to give them a software. They will say, oh, I can, super user can log in. I have a super user homepage ready. So I'm gonna give you on Friday. So QA will start testing the super user functionality. They will give, oh, I'll give you the dealer login on Tuesday, and so forth. So they agree on how they will deliver the functionality as well. Okay. All right, so that's the overall Agile, right, part of it. Hopefully you guys understand. Now let's come back to this diagram. So as I said, I'm in product owner here, right? As a product owner, is nothing but a QA who kind of works with the business and funnels down all the requirements. Now you will see here the product backlog. It's a running list of what needs to be built for the running list of all the features. So we said manage lender, manage dealer, all these things. So QA is BA is working consistently with continuously with the product business and start putting it into the tool. Okay. Business says, I want this feature. They'll start putting that in, creating the placeholder in the tool. And while they are working here with the team, as I said, I mean, that process happens before the sprint starts generally. Okay. So all the running list of requirements is called product backlog. So think about, you have our flow document, right? Every requirement 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, they can be part of the product backlog. You can document it in the tool, it becomes part of the product backlog. Okay. Now you have product backlog, all the high level requirements or requirements documented by business analyst or product owner. Then you move on to the sprint planning. This is what I was talking about. Monday, they meet as a team and they commit here. They will have a sprint planning meeting on Monday. What work we can deliver. That's what they need to agree on. So they will say, I will have login stories. That's the only thing we can deliver over 2 weeks. And that's what happens in the sprint planning. And they will pull in the stories or requirements for login. Okay, on Monday.
So the login requirement will consist of the information from Based on the data or what?
No. So you have all the running list of requirements here, right? All the product in the product backlog. You already have that.
Okay.
Now you as a team, you decide, hey, we can only deliver login functionality over next 2 weeks. So you will pull in the requirements, like a super user can log in and see their homepage. Dealer can log in and see their homepage. Or lender can log in and see their homepage. And so you will pull in as part of your, in the sprint planning meeting, and it becomes part of the sprint backlog. Because those are the stories you are working over next 2 weeks. That's terminology is sprint backlog. Okay, that's the terminology here. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now sprint backlog. Now as a team, right? So sprint plan. In the sprint planning, you create a sprint backlog. It's nothing but the requirements the whole team is working through. Now somebody has to design it, right? So there's a design. Somebody has to create test cases, so forth, right? So as part of the design process, when developers looks at it, it says super user login, right? Let's take an example, super user login. So they will say, as part of the super user login story or requirement, I need to have some super user homepage. I will also create a login screen. Okay. And I need to write a query to pull the super user information when they go on the super user homepage. So these are called tasks, the development task or task. Okay, so this is part of the design process. This task is output. Okay, so development or developer will do that for every story. What are the tasks related to story? So they can implement the story completely. Okay, so that's the concept here. So you have sprint backlog and task breakout. Okay, so every story will have some type of task. There's somewhere the development tasks that are associated with that. Now, as a QA, you will take a story, right? A super user login. You say, oh, I will have 3 test cases. So you will document those 3 test cases as associated with the user story. Okay, I'll show you when you look at the tool, it makes more clear. So you will also have 3 test cases or tests you will create as part of the story documentation. So for every story, you will have test cases associated with it, right? Just like you are doing on piece of paper right now. But you will put input in the tool. Okay, so that's a QA activity. Now, as I said, I mean, you will, as the software is being delivered over next 2 days or 3 days or 5 days, you will go and test it out, right? And work through that process. And then finally, you have finished work here. Okay, so you will say, yep, my sprint is done Friday, and we'll push it to production. Okay. Now there are 2 more terminologies: sprint review and sprint retrospective. Again, these are more for, so what the sprint review says, on Thursday, right? You have the working software, you sit down with the business and show them all the functionality actually. So you demo the functionality and so that they can complete the UAT as well. Okay, so that's what the sprint review is. Sometimes business say, oh, it's nice, but I like something else. It's not working the way we want. Maybe we want to change something. That's the whole point of the Agile process, right? They can introduce change maybe next sprint or week after. So that's what it comes out of the sprint review. So business can complete the testing, plus they can provide the feedback on what you are delivering. There is a terminology called sprint retrospective. So this one is, let's say you pulled in 3 stories for login, but you delivered only 2. So team says, oh, what went wrong here? maybe they say, oh, we didn't get the right requirement, or we had this issue, or server issues or whatever. They will say, we will improve next time. And they will come up with a plan to handle those type of issues in the future plan. So that's more like a retrospective. They reflect on what went wrong, what went well, and improve upon it. That's the whole idea. Okay. Now here, there is a term called daily Scrum meeting, right? So generally, if you are, let me come back here. So maybe that makes it clear. So this is a view of the dashboard in the tool or something like that, okay? Or you will see something that we have on the board, okay? Generally, if you are not using the tools, or if you are using the tool, you still have those things printed out and put it on the board. But you have certain things, so you want to report the progress, like on daily basis. So that's where you have typically the Scrum meetings first thing in the morning every day, maybe 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whenever everybody gets in. But it's a fixed timing and it's a 15-minute daily Scrum meeting. Everybody reports the progress and moves on. I think if you worked anywhere, maybe bank or somewhere, you have like our sales, they have 15 minutes meetings everywhere, right? That's what it is. It's a Scrum daily Scrum meeting. Okay. So let's come back to our diagram. So that's what the daily Scrum, whole team gets to huddle up and say, yep, this is what we're gonna do today, and this is our goal. Get it done. So that's the Scrum meeting part of it. Finally, you have instead of project manager, right? You have a Scrum master. Generally, a Scrum master who, if you run into any issues or you're not getting the right thing, they manage those issues and work with whoever they need to work with. So project manager is not a terminology of the Agile. It's a terminology of waterfall. Scrum master is a terminology for Agile. Okay. And you may not have dedicated project manager. You might have some team member play the role of Scrum master. So you might have a business analyst who might be playing the role of Scrum master. Okay. Is everybody clear on this process? Now we will see in the tool, because Azure DevOps will allow, or Jira or other tools, you can create the requirements, document, create the stories and put it as part of the product backlog. You can do, you can pull that into particular sprint, create the stories, do the task breakout, create your test cases, and then move the status every day. And I'll show you those some of the features as well.
What is that bottom down?
So this is somebody has to report the progress, right? So in the tool, you can see, so from Monday to Friday, somebody has to report the progress. So there are tools, this chart is available within the tool. So you can see it, okay, how much work is completed on daily basis. So people report, right, in the 9 o'clock in the morning, in the Scrum meeting, progress. They'll move the task from development to testing or testing to completed, right? So you can see it, burn down chart will say, oh, these hours are gone. So now we have remaining 80 hours left to develop and deliver. So that's what the burn down chart is. Used for more like a project management and status communication.
So the Scrum meeting, the whole QA and the developers all will be present?
Yeah, everybody, including the business.
Okay.
So product owner will be there, but they could bring in business. So if you are developing on Wednesday and say, oh, we did not talk about, maybe we need more clarification. So business might be present right there.
How can they be available every day, the business?
That's the whole idea behind it. Business has to be in the meeting from there. They have to carve out, it's a change of mindset for business as well.
Is it an in-person meeting?
Yeah, in person generally, but if you are working everywhere, then you might have a phone call or like team meetings or something, Zoom meeting. Yep. So that if team has run into any roadblock, right? Somebody has to go and schedule the meeting and business may not be available. So instead of that, they say, no, we will have dedicated 15 to 15 minutes every day. And if we can clarify in 15 minutes, then we will have, we will set up another meeting and business makes them available. Otherwise, they have to pull out the stories. If the business is not available to answer question, they will say, oh, we can't deliver this. So we have to pull that out in our sprint. They'll reflect in the sprint retrospective. And then they bring up the issue with the business and business is boss, whatever. They say, yep, this guy has to be available. Otherwise, we cannot deliver on time. Okay. All right, any question?
How you make the design, the D, it looks like a P more than a D?
Are you saying on this page or this page?
You know where you were before.
Here,
Yeah, the design.
D.
Yeah, it's a, yeah, looking hard. It's not a design to me, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my handwriting is not that good. We all forgot how to write, I think.
Vishal, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So you said most of the companies are going towards agile, right? So all of them, do they use a Scrum framework, or is there any other framework available that is compatible with agile?
So agile is a general terminology and there are frameworks, but again, nobody bothers about what framework you are using. Okay. Our ultimate goal is to deliver the product, whether it's over 2 weeks or over 2 years, doesn't matter. That's our goal. So I think a lot of companies gets into this Scrum versus there's a CMMI and other frameworks. Don't even bother to go.
Okay.
This is the process we'll follow to deliver, and that's it.
Okay.
There's minor differences, but again, the concept remains same. Okay, what you
Yes.
saw in the Agile framework.
Yes.
All right, so I think you guys have some idea about Agile now and how it works. So let's talk about tool, but before that, we can take a 5-minute break, I think. Okay, so we'll regroup at 10:23, maybe 10:30. Okay, 7 minutes break.